Something's going to have to give. Either the foundation of meritocratic discrimination that is functional, having no relationship to race. This is just about how you differentiate human activities within an organization based upon the variation in that population's capacities to do certain kinds of intellectual work. Not everybody's a professor. Not everybody's article gets published in a journal. Not everybody gets a Nobel Prize. These judgments are based upon, as I say, variation in human performance. So either you're going to give on that, you're going to compromise on that, or you're going to embed into the steady state of the dynamical system a race-dependent preference, which tacitly communicates the differences in the functioning of people at a particular kind of intellectual work. And my theorem of impossibility is you can't do that forever and have there be equality in any meaningful sense. Okay? There will be virtual or
equality. I think we need to
superficial equality, but down underneath there's going to be a problem. Yeah?
Well, I think, you're right. We can go overboard. We could destroy top universities like Harvard by just randomly choosing people to, we could have no selection process, just random. Absolutely, we could go overboard and go the wrong way, but we can't just say this doesn't exist. You look at the schools in a mile from where I live in Roxbury in Boston and the quality of those schools, what's going on in those classes, and you look at the quality of the schools in terms of what's going on in the educational experience for young kids, for 5, 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, it's totally different. So to say that these kids are not being discriminated against actively in terms of the quality of the education they're receiving, it's not true. So I do think.
Let me respond.
Yeah.
Because I don't agree with you at all. I agree that there's a difference in the quality of education. Yes, I agree with that 100%. I think I'd be very interested in knowing what you want to do about that. But hold on, before you tell me, I want to relate this to affirmative action because that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about anti-racism. It is not to be at all conceded that the net effect of affirmative action is to somehow mitigate racism. I don't, if you're, kumbaya, let's try to help the blacks. We understand the history has been rough. We're going to be on an anti-racist crusade. You evoke the Hungarian and the Jews and such. In a way, it proves my point. Because if the Jews were dependent upon the largesse of somebody to take care of them, they'd be up the creek, the proverbial creek, without a paddle. Okay? You have not so depended. Rather, you have seized such mastery as was available to you to seize in order to exert power and influence over the fate of your people. Now, for African Americans to be in the position that we hang by the thread of a Supreme Court decision about whether or not we can take place at Harvard when it's being overrun by Asians, to try to nest that within some generic concern about racism, Larry, I don't think is serious. Okay? I want to know how it is that blacks are going to be equal at Harvard if it's common knowledge that they cluster in the bottom few deciles of the people who apply in terms of their academic qualification, but they're represented in population proportionate numbers amongst the people who are actually admitted. You can't tell me that does not manifest itself in terms of a difference in performance after admissions, because I'm a college professor. I know it from my own personal experience in the classroom. I want to know how you're going to get to be equal. If you don't address the performance questions, let me just put it very plainly. If African Americans don't raise our game, now if you were talking to me about how we can raise their game, that would be different. But that would not be affirmative action at Harvard.
Okay. Yeah.
About regulatory capture and self-dealing with the rating agencies and stuff like that.
Maybe we could do a 3-way. That would be great. And I really enjoyed talking to you about. I feel quite honored talking about affirmative action because I think you're the deepest thinker in the country, and you've written on both sides of this issue. So people should know a lot of what you, the way you argue is to make, it's just the educational technique of taking a position and seeing how far it goes, but that you have, I think you have balanced views. And my guess is we're sitting in a committee deciding whether or not to accept somebody. We're probably going to accept the same class.
Yeah, I agree with that, Larry. Well, thanks. I mean, I should say thanks. I have written a lot about it. And when I pulled these lectures together for Toulouse, I realized, damn, I got like a dozen papers out there on one aspect or another of this thing. And I have written on both sides of issues. That should be said. Thank you, Larry. I know I came off sounding very archly against affirmative action because I got my deep concerns, which I tried to articulate. On the other hand, I actually wrote the foreword for the paperback edition of Bowen and Bach's book, The Shape of the River, in which I held forth at a sort of social philosophic level a disquisition on behalf of the proposition that you should do what they're trying to do, which is get some Black and brown kids out of Harvard and out of Princeton and like places. So I'm not,
you're playing devil's advocate, but you're doing this throughout life. I mean, it's not, you've got a history of challenging people's thinking, and that's the only way we can get to some truth is by having somebody clearly articulate a position and have some back and forth. But I do think that affirmative action is not the answer, and going overboard is also not the answer. And this suit with Harvard is really trying to go to an extreme. That's my concern.
Yeah. Yeah, and my concern, I have been writing about this my whole career. You're right. I don't know about a Nobel Prize, man. That's very generous of you. Thank you. But I'm not going to bet my life or hold my breath on that.
It's coming.
But this idea that the history has cast a long shadow, and this idea that the family and communal structures are somewhat apart from the economic and transactional structures, and yet they complement and interact with one another. So race is meaningful in that it colors, so to speak, it affects, channels some of this informal associational behavior, these institutions like families and communities and networks of affiliation that get created. And that it's the spillover in human capital within these networks of human capital acquisition, because there's complementarities, such that the segregation of the networks by race creates objective differences in the ability to get your hands on skill-enhancing resources, including the resource of associating with people who've already enhanced their skills. So this kind of backdrop, which leads naturally to some kind of affirmative action thing, that's the foundation out of which my kind of pro-affirmative action leanings see. And what I'm differentiating is between the transition and the steady state. In the transition, you really do need to attend to making these positional moves, but the steady state is different. And that's why how long is such a really important question.
I would say go to Hungary.
Go to Hungary and look at
the anti-Semitism today. We're still in the transition.
Okay.